antioxidant. The it also has a high level of L-DOPA, which is used kind of in modern day treatment for Parkinson's disease. So it's a kind of complex plant in the terms of the chemicals that it produces. And it's also used as a food in some parts of the world and as feed. However, cattle aren't kind of quick to graze on it. It's maybe a secondary choice for them, but they could be maybe trained to eat it more. Uh, and it's used as a cover crop. And even here in Hawaii, it's been used as a cover crop, maybe more commonly in the past. So there's this 1911 article published by the Hawaii Agriculture Experiment Station that discusses the merits of velvet bean as a cover crop, particularly for sugarcane plantations. And here's a picture from Hawaii of somebody kind of surrounded by velvet beans. So you can see from the picture, at least some varieties of velvet bean have a pretty strong growing habit or like trellising habit. Um, okay. So the kind of agricultural properties and benefits, I'm just going to step through them one at a time here. Um, so these are the kind of benefits more broadly of cover crops, and for each of the benefit categories, you'll see velvet bean has a pretty strong performance. So the first thing I want to talk about is drought resistance. So one limiting factor for a lot of growers in planting cover crops is the need to irrigate the cover crops and the expense associated with that. Um, and so velvet bean is a pretty drought tolerant option for a cover crop. We did a trial in our field study where we had where we irrigated the velvet bean kind of for different durations of time. So here in the picture on the left is we irrigated for 2 weeks, then turned off the irrigation 4 weeks, and then on the right, 8 weeks. And so there wasn't a lot of difference here between the 4 and the 8 weeks. And I have a graph of that coming up, but it seemed, if it gets a little bit of water at start to get established, it produces pretty healthy biomass and can withstand some water stress pretty well. So it's a good option for uh, if you're trying to limit irrigation and the expense of that. It's also good uh, c for controlling weeds, kind of in the bridge season between crops. So it produces a really thick canopy that's going to outcompete weeds. There may also be some allelopathic or chemical-based compounds that it produces that prevents weeds growing. But you can see here how the rows kind of grow together, produces a really strong canopy. I saw one article from somewhere else that they said it was effective over a course of 3 years. It effectively reduced nut sedge, which I know is a pretty uh, severe or difficult to get rid of weed here. So good for that. And then abundant biomass. So biomass you want because for the way that the biomass can enrich the soil. And so velvet bean, as you saw in the previous picture, produces abundant biomass. And here we did a trial where we compared the biomass from various cover crops that are kind of common in Hawaii, the most common probably being sun hemp, velvet bean, and sorghum. And we compared how velvet bean compared. And so it has similar kind of biomass production as both sun hemp and sorghum, uh, maybe slightly better than sun hemp. And then you can also see with the different color bars there, the blue one is the irrigation for 2 weeks, the orange was for 4 weeks, and the gray was 8 weeks. So you can see for velvet bean, the difference between 4 weeks and 8 weeks of irrigation was not very significant. So again, if you can irrigate it enough to get it started, you can probably turn off the irrigation once it's established. Velvet bean is beneficial too because it is a legume, so it fixes nitrogen, and it does that very effectively. It's up here on this graph. We have percent of nitrogen in the cover crop. And then on the y-axis or on the left, you have the percent that's plant available nitrogen. And so you see velvet beans furthest to the right, meaning it has among the highest percent nitrogen compared to other common cover crops. And that would equate with the highest amount of plant available nitrogen once it's incorporated into the soil. So it's a good choice for if you want to reduce fertilizer use, because it will hold the nitrogen there and keep it available for plants, as well as fixing nitrogen. And then related to pests, this is the kind of exciting part for sweet potatoes. So, we just heard about the damages the plant parasitic nematodes can cause for sweet potato production. Here in this graph, this is a graph of plant parasitic nematode population at the harvest of sweet potato. So what we did is we grew um, four different cover crops. So here on the chart, we have bare ground, BG, marigold, MG, sorghum, SG, and then sun hemp, which is SH, and finally farthest to the right in pink is velvet bean. Um, and so there was very low levels of nematodes, plant parasitic nematodes at the beginning of the cover crop. When we harvested the cover crop, there wasn't really any plant parasitic nematodes. But then once the sweet potato were planted, the numbers went up really, really quickly. And by the end, in the plots that had previously just been bare ground, um, you can see here on the far left, this pink box, you have pretty significant levels of reniform or plant parasitic nematode. But the velvet bean suppresses the population, keeping it, to less than half of what you would otherwise see. So velvet bean and sun hemp both were strong performers there. And this is mostly actually reniform. So in the field where we did this, we didn't see the root knot. So root knot and reniform are two of the biggest plant parasitic nematodes. We didn't see much root or any root knot kind of replication on the sweet potatoes. We were only seeing reniform. And then kind of more broadly, velvet bean promotes soil health as well as or better than other similar cover crops. So some ways, kind of elements of soil health here. We have soil carbon, soil nitrogen, and soil microbial community. So starting here with soil carbon, you see that velvet bean has, significantly higher amount of soil carbon compared to the plots where bare ground and marigold were grown. And also that the nitrogen is significantly higher than bare ground and the non-leguminous cover crops. It's similar to sun hemp, which is also a legume cover crop. And then for soil microbial community, so this has to deal with what sort of life is living in the soil. Tend to want a diverse soil community because it helps the nutrients kind of stay available to the plant and provides others benefits like pest management too. So the velvet bean, which is here at the bottom, VB, had the highest diversity rating. This is based on PLFA, which is a phospholipid test. And it also had the highest amount of fungus, and AMF is a type of beneficial fungus, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus. So basically the takeaway here from this microbial box is that velvet bean promotes a more diverse soil environment um, that promotes fungal growth, which that can be beneficial for the crop as well. In terms of cultivating velvet bean, it's very easy to grow, has a pretty versatile to pH. You want well-drained soil. The one soil where it tends to have problems is in cold, wet soil. So as long as it's well-drained and fairly warm, you'll be fine. We were planting seeds 12 inches apart, and that was giving us plenty of kind of canopy and biomass. And then 4 or 5 feet apart rows. And then there are bush type and runner type. So I know some people here growing the bush type, if you don't want it to kind of take over, bush type could be handy. The pictures you saw were of the runner type. That's what we were trying in our survey. Weediness, that's always a concern for cover crops. Is it going to come back as a weed? It's been a problem in Florida for or it's been at least reported as a problem there with some velvet being grown. But as long as you properly terminate the crop, we haven't really seen it be too aggressive as a weed in our plots. And I don't think there's nobody saying it's a concern to be invasive, but it could, be a weed if it's not properly terminated. And if you want to try some velvet bean, we have seeds available in our lab. You can contact Dr. Kunwi Wong at this email address here, and we can get you in touch with some. So as a summary, velvet bean is drought resistant, it's a weed suppressant, produces quick and abundant biomass, fixes nitrogen, suppresses nematodes, at least reniform nematodes. promote soil health, and we have seeds available if you want to try it out. If there's any questions.
Thank you, everybody. So I'll summarize some of our study on using different organic approach for different pest management. Some of that already mentioned by Ben, so I'll skip through some of that, but I'll also highlight some of the data that another graduate student, Landon Wong, did that Ben hasn't present, as well as Melanie. And so first we'll look into insect pests. As Roshan mentioned just now, that we have lots of weevils problem. So we have the sweet potato weevil, which can be managed by hanging some pheromone trap, very specific targeting on just trapping the sweet potato weevil. But we don't have a pheromone trap effective to control the other two type of weevil that we saw in our field. So the rough sweet potato weevil that will cause the galerial sclerotization on outside of the skin. So this one doesn't bore inside. The sweet potato weevil, like Roshan say, it bore inside and make the fresh berry beetle. But the West Indian sweet potato weevil will also make similar damage like the sweet potato weevil. They also make small holes, and so this one don't have a pheromone trap that we can control it effectively, although there are some suggestion of light trap that can trap them. We haven't tried it yet. And at the end of Roshan's talk, he also mentioned about the wine borer or stem borer. We see it quite a lot over here on Oahu, where they will bore inside the basal stem of the plants, and sometimes even bore to the tuberous roots and cause significant damage as well. And so here are life cycle of the sweet potato weevil. They take about 47 days from eggs to adult, but after they become adult, they will remain alive for another 42 days, so they can did quite a lot of damage. So the female will lay their eggs inside the sweet potato. If this brown part is the sweet potato roots, the whole young juvenile stage will stay inside the roots and keep feeding on the roots until they deplete the roots. Then some of the adult will go outside and find a new roots to infect. And so that means if you spray, unless it's systemic insecticide, it's hard to control them unless the adult come out, so you can reach the adult, but the juvenile stay inside. So here's a chart that another one of the author comparing different type of weevil. Also, although this one is not the West Indian sweet potato weevil, but it's similar to this. The adult looks similar. West Indian sweet potato weevil adult looks similar to this species, but their larvae kind of looks different for the rough sweet potato weevil and the sweet potato weevil. So when a sweet potato weevil find the sweet potato to attack, they can either infecting through or feeding through the stem and bore inside the stem and go down to the roots, or they can directly just go to the base of the plants and lay eggs inside the roots. That's why Roshan mentioned that if they just keep the planting bed furrow and throw soil on top, you can actually control the weevil because they couldn't dig hole. So they are not very strong insects that can bore inside the soil to get to the roots. But when they are dry condition, then your soil crack, then they will find a hole to get inside the root system. So culturally, you can just keep throwing soil on top and protect your crop, but this is quite labor intensive. So when it comes to the rough sweet potato weevil, you can see is very damaging, making unmarketable yield. CITA has another publication by Todii. In 2016, you can look up this publication where he find that using systemic insecticide like 7-Bele can keep them in check pretty well. But any of the contact type of organic pesticide like Botanigard, the Mycotrol is the Omri brand for Beauveria bassiana, doesn't control as good as the systemic type of insecticide. So actually not different from the untreated control. When it comes to West Indian sweet potato weevil, it has similar life cycle like the sweet potato weevil, about 33 days from egg to adult, but it will live even longer as an adult. So this is how it looks like inside, and very similar damage like the sweet potato weevil. So chemical control is available, but since we are mostly talking about organic approach for pest management today, so we'll switch on to talk about some potential biocontrol agent, including the pheromone trap that we found it pretty effective. So this is sold as alpha scent. And I think Roshan published an article with Taiwan Gu on how to use this pheromone trap to monitor the population in the field to decide when to spray pesticide. And so they come up with a number of 50 per week per trap. But actually, when I look it up in the literature, some entomologists suggest that no more than 4 per week per trap will start to cause damage. But if it's something we can tolerate, then we can significantly reduce the pesticide use just hanging this pheromone trap around. But I'll also share some data on the use of entomopathogenic nematodes and entomopathogenic fungi. So they are called entomo because this type of fungi only attack insects, and usually they are quite broad spectrum. They don't target on just one type of insects. As long as they are soil dwelling, they can encounter the insects, they can attack them. So in one trial, we combine all this treatment together with the pheromone trap of the alpha scent, which looks like this on the top corner here. So you insert this rubber thing that has the pheromone infused into the rubber and put inside the cages that they provide. And so every cage can span around a control area of 60-meter diameter apart. So you don't have to hang too much, so because they can reach up to 200 feet to draw the male sweet potato weevil to the trap. And so you can monitor it every week and check. Our field, we keep it under 20, but we will hope that it's below 10 would be good. And then we do a monthly spray of Beauveria Mycotrol. We also have different type of cover crop that Ben mentioned to you just now. Marigold, sorghum, sunham, and velvet bean. And our biggest pest in this field was rough sweet potato weevil. And it turned out that the velvet bean, for some reason, can also reduce the rough sweet potato damaged roots. So we are still puzzling what causes the effect of velvet bean. We don't think this is by chance because it's statistically different. I have some hints in the next slide that I will be showing you. But we're also very intrigued by the result of Beauveria. We say that Beauveria might not encounter the sweet potato weevil unless the adult came out. Then when we spray it, you can catch them. But I guess if you can control the adult, you can also control the population. So these are sweet potato weevil damage roots at the end of the harvest season, significantly lower if you have the Beauveria spray. So this was a monthly spray treatment. So when we try to understand what caused the velvet bean to be able to have less rough sweet potato weevil, So Melanie, who is another student that put some trap using a waxworm larvae. As I mentioned before, many of these entomopathogenic fungi, they are not host specific. So we use waxworm as a study insects buried into the ground that has the velvet bean treatment. We put in a field cage and bury for 1 week and take out the waxworm and try to let them grow for 2 weeks. And turn out that there are more of the waxworm colonized by the top picture here is the Bouveria, and the bottom picture here is Metarhizium. So some of the Bouveria could be from what we spray, but we didn't inoculate any Metarhizium in this field, which is understandable because there are quite a lot of indigenous population of entomopathogenic fungi in the field soil, and perhaps the legume, the high nitrogen content, as well as the organic matter from the velvet bean, which you see Ben show you that it can stimulate mycorrhizae fungi or the other saprophytic fungi more than the other cover crop, might have also enhanced the colonization of the weevil by the entomopathogenic fungi. So now here I will share some results from USDA's nematologist, Roxana Meyer, who is, I think, is present here as well. And so she has isolated some local entomopathogenic nematodes. This one is a waxworm that is colonized by the one species of entomopathogenic fungi called Heterorhabditis indica. So all these white shiny things is actually nematode coming out from the head of a waxworm, Galeria worm. And so she used this and make into suspension and spray on the sweet potato that are infested by sweet potato weevil. So they already feed the sweet potato weevil with this different with the sweet potato tuberous roots, and she compared those that buried in a soil tub. So this brown thing is soil. If you totally buried it inside the soil versus partially buried, and then the other one is totally not buried, and then she sprayed the EPN and see how many of the sweet potato weevil inside the tuber is colonized by the Heterorhabditis indica. So she find that, yes, if you don't bury it, very few of them will die. Very few of the pupae or the sweet potato weevil will die from the entomopathogenic nematodes. So she has two rates. One is 1,000 and the other is 10,000. The 10,000 obviously is infecting the weevil better. But if you it's partially buried, is actually the best and slightly better than the fully buried. But the nematode like a moist condition. So if you leave it on top of the soil, this is very risky. And so if you try to spray sweet potato weevil after harvesting a few, but if those tuber are left on the soil, tuberous roots are left on the soil surface, then it's not a effective way to use EPN to control the tuberous roots that are infected by sweet potato weevil. So same thing happened here. EPN recover is also higher when the roots are partially buried, which often, if you don't try to throw soil on your tuberous roots, this is the most common scenario that you will see in the field. So making this entomopathogenic nematode is very label intensive, and Hawaii still have strong regulation on the import of commercial entomopathogenic nematodes, even though in the mainland you can easily buy a bucket full of millions of entomopathogenic nematodes easily. But since it's difficult to be imported into Hawaii, so we have to rely on local source, which are some lab like us that will grow them. And so to get them in enough number, I think Roxana are working with some clientele that really need EPN to build up the population, but she suggested that maybe you can just use it after you harvest your crop and just target on spraying into the field, especially the partially buried tuberous roots. Remove any cow from the surface to get the population down before your next crop season begins. So now I'll move to some of the data from Landon Wong, where he checked different rate of the botanic guard, which is Beauveria bassiana versus Master is a commercial brand of Metarhizium. And turn out that the Metarhizium is not good at all. So these are BG is botanic guard, and the Metarhizium Master is MM. So the Master is not different from the untreated control in terms of the sweet potato vivo mortality rate. But he also did some another field trial and find out that the Beauveria recovery at the sweet potato harvest was significantly higher if you spray the botanic guard at monthly interval. So it's working, Beauveria, in the field. However, Metarhizium in the literature are shown to be more promising entomopathogenic fungi. And luckily, we have another scientist here at Manoa. They isolated strains of Metarhizium from local source from, I think this is cocoa head. So he called it KO002. And so we put it into meal run to add it as an inoculum and let it colonize the meal run, add some nutrients to it so that we don't have to grow a lot of them. He started by colonizing the Metarhizium onto cooked rice, but still, if you have to cook so many rice to make the Metarhizium, that's a lot of rice to cook. So we thought it's cheaper to put it on the meal run, and then we throw it into the soil after colonizing for about 2 weeks, and then we throw in about 250 cc at the base of each plant, and the result was kind of interesting. The unamended sweet potato yield is over here. So the amended one, it has significantly higher marketable yield than the loss due to the sweet potato vivo. And in terms of sweet potato vivo density, the amended definitely reduced the sweet potato vivo density in a field trial that we did in Ku'uloa Ranch. So to summarize this study, multiple arthropod pests, especially vivo and stem borer, are very damaging to sweet potato production. The good news is that they share similar natural enemies. So if we have more rough sweet potato vivo, we probably could also use the EPN or EPF to reduce their number because they share similar pests, similar natural enemies. Commercial EPN are regulated and not allowed to import to Hawaii, so using local isolates of EPN or EPF can be an option for us. So the EPF we find useful to use locally is the Metarhizium KO002, but it needs to be cultured. So rotating the sweet potato with velvet bean cover crop seems to be able to enhance the naturally occurring indigenous EPF, the entomopathogenic fungi in the soil that lead to less sweet potato vivo damage roots. And then definitely I will highly recommend if you have sweet potato vivo, buy some alpha sand the lure that can reduce the population. And if you use Beauveria, you can either spray it monthly or even bi-weekly is worthwhile as shown in our data. And sanitation to ensure weevil-infested roots left on the soil surface is not left over there because you might be harboring all the pests for the next crop. So now I'll move on to talk about plant parasitic nematodes. So Roshan showed you that some of the roots got cracked, and that's caused by, we're not sure this is caused by reniform or root knot. In the literature, they did say that if you have root knot, you will see gall on the fine lateral roots, but the mature roots will cause all this cracking because the way the root knot feeding on the small roots, and if the roots can still grow, then they will have uneven growth. And if it's reniform damage, they will just totally stunt the development of the roots. And so the roots can be long, but it doesn't swollen up at the end. But we still try to verify it and see if this is really the case. So try to understand the life cycle of the target pest. Sometimes can help us better to decide how to manage our pests. So in general, if you have sandy soil, you will have more root knot nematodes. But if you have high clay soil, then you will have more reniform nematodes problem. If you have root knot nematodes, the damage on sweet potato is way higher than reniform nematodes. But if you have reniform nematode build up to a very high population density, you will suffer from big yield loss anyway. So root knot nematodes can survive in the field. So both of them will go through 4 life stages molding before they become adult and can lay eggs. The root knot can, sometimes they don't have to go through sexual reproduction. They can just keep laying eggs by themselves. And so one generation will take about 3 to 4 weeks. So in a year of warm weather in Hawaii, you can have 12 generations of nematode reproduction, and the eggs can survive in the soil when conditions are not favorable until you grow the next sweet potato crop. Then they will all hatch and come out. It's difficult to control the eggs. The juvenile stage is the easiest to target on. But if you have reniform nematodes, they can survive even as a wormiform stage when the soil is dry and there's no host for them to feed on. They will roll up their body and they can survive for up to 2 years in the soil. And when you plant your next crop, they will come out and infect your plants. So to develop good integrated nematode management, we like to see more biodiversity so that you can switch your crop so you don't always maintain a highly susceptible crop. The other thing we like to encourage is to increase natural enemies that can target on the nematodes. So one entomopathogenic fungi can attack weevil. Nematodes also have all kind of fungi that attack them in the soil naturally, and most of them rely on organic matter in your soil. So other approach is try to make your plants more resistant. So selecting variety that Roshan mentioned just now that has higher resistance against the root knot or reniform nematodes would reduce the effort you need to spend to control them after, or improving the plant health by maintaining better nutrient cycling. So like getting more nitrogen back into the soil to stimulate plant growth. As the plants grow faster, they can tolerate more nematode damage. Most importantly, we want to target on the most vulnerable stage of the nematodes. That is the juvenile stage that is outside the roots so that it can get to the chemical that we want to kill it with, and don't let them go into survival stage. And so to that, we have many options of cover crop that can release toxic compound against the nematodes. So sun hemp produce monocrotaline, and but most of the content is in the leaves. And so you need to incorporate the leaves into the soil to come in contact with the nematodes to kill the nematodes. If you use marigold, the allelopathic compound is called alpha-tertinol. It's leaching out from the roots while the plants are photosynthesizing and growing. Then they will leach out the compound to kill the nematodes. So it's not like you can incorporate into the soil to kill the nematodes. It needs to grow for some time to kill the nematodes. On the other hand, brown mustard is also a good has good nematicidal effect. So they contain a compound called glucosinolate, which I will show you later how they can act like a biofumigants. Another cover crop, sorghum, Sudan grass, also is a biofumigants, and they contain in the leaves they contain diurin, and when it breaks down, it also make biofumigant. So the velvet bean is produce a compound called L-dopa, which, like Ben say, it has medicinal effect for Parkinson disease, kind of paralyze your muscles, slow them down from shaking too much. There is one study before that say it can also paralyze the nematodes. It never kill the nematodes totally, but just paralyze them. So when it comes to sun hemp, we did a strip till cover cropping approach using the sun hemp and an alternate row. We tilled it down, incorporate into the soil. And this is the row that we'll plant our cash crop so that it can kill the nematodes. And then we chop down the remaining row as a periodic mulch to suppress weeds, but also a slower release nitrogen over time. We find that in this system, we significantly increase the bacterial feeding nematodes, fungal feeding nematodes that help with nutrient cycling, making plants making the nutrients mineralize further for plants to uptake. And as time goes by, the bigger nematodes, like omnivorous nematodes, will also feed on the bacterial feeding and fungal feeding nematodes, and they will make the soil food web more structure and more better nutrient cycling in the soil. And so the cover crop was planted for 2 months from June to August. The rest of the data is from a cucumber crop. And so you can see for plant parasitic nematodes or the herbivorous nematodes, because sun hemp has such a suppressive effects against the root knot and reniform nematodes, it keeps the number very low. The triangle is the background. So after one crop of cucurbit, the population become very high at the end. So we try combining sun hemp with Mode X camigation, so dripping it in through the irrigation line. So Mode X is a neem product, azadirachtin, and for insects, it will stop the insects from molding, so that's why the name Mode X. So when it comes to reniform nematode that spend 2 to 3 stages of their life cycle in the soil, it can kill the reniform better than killing the root knot. For root knot, it only have 1 life stages in the soil. So, but nonetheless, we see that the treatment that received the Mode X and sun hemp has significantly less root gall compared to the untreated control, which totally lost their functional roots. And same thing for zucchini. So the untreated is very gally. And so when we try on sweet potato, together with another chemical, so this is not an organic nematicide, but it's a synthetic one, it's very effective against the root knot nematodes. And we'll compare that to the sun hemp plus Mode X. It doesn't suppress the root knot nematode in the soil as good as the velum. But if it's reniform nematodes, the Mode X is very good in controlling them compared to the untreated control in both cases. But as I mentioned before, root knot is more damaging on sweet potato than the reniform nematodes. So if you have more root knot problem, then your yield will be higher if you can control the root knot nematodes with velum. So even though Mode X control reniform very well, the marketable yield is not as good as the one treated with velum. So Vellum suppress root knot nematodes and the Mold X suppress reniform nematodes. And I think Vellum is not registered for sweet potato. So switching to using marigold. So as I mentioned, they has to grow and leach out the compound. So this farmer, they are switching the planting row, the alleyway with the bitter melon. So they benefits from not having to grow the whole field with marigold. When it comes to brown mustard, the glucosinolate in the tissue of the brown mustard that make the pungent taste, when you flare mold it, it will interact with an enzyme inside the leaf tissues and convert it into isothiocyanate. And this is the fumigants that can kill nematodes as well as other soil-borne fungi. And so because they are volatile, so if you cover it just for 1 week, will significantly increase the suppression of root knot nematodes after we plant a crop of zucchini in this field. If you don't till it, you will actually increase the nematode number because they are actually a host. But because they are hosts, they make the nematode come out from the egg stage, so you can kill it with the fumigants, so it's more effective that way. In terms of sorghum, we compare, there are many types of sorghum. Turn out that there's a energy sorghum, we call it NX2 or NXD61. It's available from Kulao Seeds Supply. We find that most of the other sorghum variety, they lost their nematode suppressive effect after they are older, 2 or 3 months old. But when we tested the NX2 variety, even at 3 months old, it can suppress the female development. So when we grow a crop of eggplants, then we see that the NX2 or that most of the sorghum, it increased soil carbon in 1 year, improve water infiltration in 1 year, improve soil food web structure in 2 cropping cycle, moving the soil from stress or depleted condition into a stable and enriched soil food web condition. And it also increased the soil aggregate stability after 2 years of rotating sorghum with the eggplants. And this one Ben already shared with you, velvet bean and sunham suppress the reniform very well in our study, that we don't have too much root knot problem. And the other thing I mentioned just now, nematode, just like the vivo, has lots of fungus natural enemies. So some of them will make constricting ring, and if the nematodes swim by, they are sticky and they also trap the nematodes. And there are also bacteria that attack the root knot nematodes. And this will usually be more abundant if you don't disturb the soil too much and so that the mycelium can survive. And so typically if you grow sweet potato for 5 months, you have plenty of time for this fungi to develop. But if you don't have too much in your soil, then you can inoculate it with a commercial product called Melocon. So this is Pecilomyces lilisenum. It's a commercial product, and even in Hawaii, we can buy it. So I got it from Simplot. It mostly attack the egg stages. So even you have survival stage of the root knot nematodes or reniform nematodes, they are both susceptible to this egg parasite, fungal egg parasite. Soil health, I think this data Ben already shared with you, so I'll just skip through it. Just summarizing, velvet bean is pretty drought tolerant, can suppress weeds, and no need to irrigate too much. In terms of microbial biomass, is most diverse. It can increase mycorrhizae fungi as well as some other gram-negative bacteria. It definitely turned the soil into more fungal-dominated soil food web, and so increase the soil carbon and infiltration rate, even though not significant, and the ammonia, nitrogen in the soil. And so I don't want to take up too much time. These are just repeating what Ben is showing you. So I'll leave more time for you guys to ask questions. Something about the plant growth. The velvet bean could also it is also found to increase many of the gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria and AM fungi. It might be an additional benefits to help your soil to be healthier and lead to better nematode suppression. So we are not entirely sure whether the velvet bean suppress the nematodes totally due to the chemical compound, but it could also be enhancing many natural enemies in the soil. Okay, with that, I will just stop. Here are all the QR code that you can get different website linked to the study we summarize and publish mostly in Hanai. Okay, so I should, oh, I do have a survey form here,